1967, two Warringah councillors were prosecuted under the Secret Commission's Prohibition Act for receiving bribes from a development company to influence planning and development decisions. Both received jail sentences and Warringah Council was dismissed. In 1971, author Frank Hardy published The Outcasts of Fulgara, a farcical dig at Fulgara society and its sometimes corrupt officials and councillors. Hardy's mythical shire of Fulgara was, of course, a thinly disguised Warringah. Then, in December 1985, amid allegations of bribery and local dissatisfaction with the handling of development applications at Palm Beach and Mona Vale, Warringah Council was again dismissed. Soon after reinstatement in 1988 came the catalyst for the secession of Pittwater from Warringah, the construction of the multi-storey Delmage building at the corner of Mona Vale Road and Bungan Street. There was intense public outrage at the height and size of the building and the way in which it had been approved by the council. This resulted in the sacking of the council and ultimately the secession of Pittwater from Warringah in November 1991, so that by the close of 1992, Pittwater residents were finally in control of their own destiny. On a broader canvas, prior to entering politics, current Federal Treasurer Scott Morrison managed policy for the Building Owners and Managers Association of Australia for the 6 years to 1995. In 1996, the association became the Property Council of Australia, an openly self-interested coalition of developers and property owners with a mission to lobby governments. 1999 brought another developer lobby group, the Urban Task Force. Comprised of the major property companies in Australia and many smaller developers, it's since been described as the sunny face for an often shady business, offering intimacy with ministers and senior bureaucrats. In Warringah, council elections in 1999 were followed by a groundswell of community dissatisfaction, and this became so serious that Warringah was again dismissed in 2003, this time because of vicious and uncompromising infighting among councillors. From 2000 to 2004, Scott Morrison was the New South Wales State Director of the Liberal Party. In 2007, the Urban Task Force received from the New South Wales Greens the dubious honour of a Bad Developer Award for most insidious industry lobbying effort for its campaign to have the planning laws rewritten so as to remove local councils from decision-making about developments. CEO of the Urban Task Force, Chris Johnson, diligently spruiks for his developer clients. To Johnson, the affordable housing crisis can easily be resolved by allowing developers to build 20% bigger and 20% higher, so the 5-storey developments become 6 and 10 stories 12. And affordable only because the government would subsidise 20% of the rental value for the first 10 years. Then the properties can be sold on the open market. This sounds like developer paradise. Build higher, bigger, and have the government subsidise the yield while waiting for values to climb even further. The Urban Task Force seems to have the ear of government, probably because Johnson was previously Executive Director of the New South Wales Department of Planning. 2007 also saw the Howard government establish the United States Study Centre at Sydney University via a $25 million government endowment. The centre's stated purpose is to increase understanding of the United States in Australia. Lucy Turnbull is on the board of directors. Following a brief dalliance with local independent Alex McTaggart, Robert Gordon-Stokes returned Pittwater to the Liberal fold in 2007. In that same year, he delivered his Macquarie University doctoral thesis on planning. Titled The Battle for the Big Backyard, its subtitle is An Examination of the Conflict Between Suburban Character and Urban Consolidation, and the use of public participation in managing this conflict. Stokes' thesis sets out a blueprint for devolving planning power to appointed, non-elected technocrats. 2007 also saw Lucy Turnbull join the board of directors of the Property Council of Australia. Its lobbying efforts appear to be increasingly rewarded, with high-profile directors at least. David Shoebridge has described the Property Council as the shadow government of New South Wales on the grounds that
who is the government here? Doesn't look like it's Mike Baird. It looks like the puppet master is the Property Council. What they want, that's what they get.
The Property Council's budget for advocacy and communication, $7.4 million in 2015, resulted in 55 submissions and attendance at an extraordinary 230 government meetings. Another $7.2 million for networking ensured the information was disseminated where it counts. These deep coffers have funded the Council's TV and radio campaigns, such as this one to preserve negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts.
But if politicians play with negative gearing, all this will be at risk. Property is no game. Don't play with negative gearing.
In December 2008, Scott Morrison was appointed to Malcolm Turnbull's front bench as Shadow Minister for Housing and Local Government. Whether or not this is because of his early Property Council experience is hard to say, but it augurs well for future Property Council lobbying. In 2009, American Edward Blakely was appointed Honorary Professor of the US Studies Centre at Sydney University. Blakely had previously been hired by New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin to manage the clean-up and replan after Hurricane Katrina. He laid claim to the title of Recovery Czar.
We hope to have a program in place by June, and we anticipate that we'll start building by September.
Some insist that plan has fallen short.
All the talk that we hear so frequently, in September we'll see the cranes. You can't do that anymore.
But his role there was never far from controversy, and it was averred that Nagin and Blakely complement each other admirably. Nagin cannot remember things that did happen, while Blakely can effortlessly recall a bunch of things that didn't. In an October 2009 interview, Blakely claimed that the people of New Orleans were lazy and virulently racist, and that unless the next mayor is very clever, it's going to explode and there are going to be race riots. Louisiana's Lieutenant Governor said the comments were offensive and untrue, and he called Blakely's tenure in New Orleans a complete failure. It was around this time that the US doctrine of change management became firmly established in Australia. Change management seeks to manage the unpleasant side effects of globalisation and rapid technological change.
If you've ever tried to make a big change in your team or organisation, you'll know you can't just expect everyone to hop on board. Many people feel wary of change, so it's important to prepare them for it and guide them through the process.
Normally employed at the company level, change management can also be used to railroad people into predetermined outcomes and to manage their disappointment and grief, their sense of loss, rather than fix the causes of that loss. In May 2011, Barry O'Farrell's coalition convincingly ousted a discredited Labor. O'Farrell had campaigned on a platform of no forced council amalgamations and the return of planning powers to local councils.
That the Liberal Party was formed to represent all people, not sectional interest. Will deliver the honest and accountable government you deserve. We'll end Labor's overdevelopment. We'll scrap Part 3A and we will rewrite the Planning Act.
In December 2011, Lucy Turnbull, a director of the Property Council of Australia, professes a desire for council amalgamation in a Property Council video, consistent with the Property Council's lobbying mission.
I think it would be good if local governments could think a little bit more strategically about themselves as being part of a metropolitan system, not just being a patchwork of millions of precincts and small neighbourhoods and villages. It's a personal belief I have that in fact that would be much easier to achieve if there was a bit more consolidation of local government areas.
In 2013, precinct planning for the development of Ingleside commences, despite Pittwater Council having already completed the planning task as set by government in 1994. It's now an unusual partnership between Council and Urban Growth New South Wales, the property arm of government, led by the Department of Planning. At around 700 hectares, Ingleside is a huge development, stretching all the way from Elanora through to Bayview. In July 2013, Pittwater Council launches the Enliven Mona Vale Business Initiative, promoted with a video so soporific it's viewed by virtually no one. If this is the vision, it raises no alarm, and its profit app generates little interest. But Enliven Mona Vale is now identified as a problem needing a solution that's taken by the Mayor and General Manager to the Future Cities Collaborative, a consultancy run out of the US Studies Centre by none other than Mr Ed Blakely, the controversial recovery czar of New Orleans. The 24th of October 2013 sees the launch of the book Pittwater, A Secessionist View, written by Robert Dunn, Pittwater's first elected mayor. It's the 21st anniversary of the event. According to Stokes,
the development of the culture, of which Robert was such a critical part, has led to the creation of what is a wonderful and vibrant and successful and truly grassroots council.
Mayor Townsend also assures Dunn and his audience that
So you can be assured that your council that you set up is in good hands today.
like nearly everyone else in Pittwater outside the cabal of Stokes, Townsend and Ferguson, Dunn has little idea of what's coming down the line. Following Barry O'Farrell's shock resignation in April 2014, Michael Baird becomes Premier and Robert Gordon-Stokes is Minister for Environment and Assistant Minister for Planning. If you think the two roles conflict, you'd be right, but it's a masterstroke, and at last Stokes' theoretical battle for the big backyard can begin to be put into practice. In Stokes' own electorate of Pittwater, from the moment of the Baird-Stokes takeover, the 2014 Mona Vale Master Plan evolves into the Mona Vale Place Plan, and a red light switches on, signalling major change ahead for Pittwater. Stokes is thrilled there are people on Pittwater Council who can see the vision. But just what is the vision, and is it shared by the people of Pittwater? In August 2014, Mayor Townsend, General Manager Ferguson and several others travelled to the United States with Ed Blakely and his Future Cities Collaborative on a Pittwater-funded study tour. They return with a vision of transforming Mona Vale, via the strategies of placemaking and change management, into a vibrant urban centre. This will be achieved mainly through property development. Two carrots are held out: privately supplied affordable housing and a revitalised bus service in the form of the B Line. But Sydney bus timetables already meet B Line specifications in peak hours. Further, rumour has it that not only will the B Line be quickly privatised, but that Mona Vale Bus Depot is the most likely site for an affordable housing development. Looking ahead, it's possible to forecast B Line bus service cutbacks even before the service has been built. The placemaking movement is inspired by the 1960s work of Jane Jacobs in the United States. Placemaking supposedly capitalises on a local community's assets with the intention of creating public spaces that promote people's health, happiness and well-being. In Australia, the term has been modified to place planning. A simple Google search reveals the term to be virtually synonymous with Pittwater Council and Mona Vale. In America, placemaking has been applied to rundown inner-city areas as a means of economic revitalisation. But in Australia, since the 1960s, we've been gentrifying our rundown inner-city areas. Think Paddington, Balmain and Newtown. Here, the people already have a strong sense of place, probably because of the relatively egalitarian nature of Australian society and the lack of the racial tensions that so characterise American cities. So the principal reason for introducing place planning, to create a sense of place and attachment, is unnecessary both at Mona Vale in particular and Pittwater in general, because we already have a strong sense of place and of local identity. That's why we choose to live here. Pittwater and Mona Vale is an understated, successful and sophisticated society, not a broken down, decaying, socially stratified American inner-city disaster. Australian society has little to learn from America in this regard. The fact is, the enlightened Mona Vale Place Plan is a Trojan horse for high-rise property development. In April 2015, Michael Baird wins the New South Wales election in his own right and appoints his close friend Rob Stokes Minister for Planning. From this point, it's game on, not just for Pittwater, but for the rest of the state too, because environment is now captive to development-oriented planning. The fox is now in charge of the hen house. Simultaneously, the government indicates its intention to amalgamate councils and to make them subject to a new body, the Greater Sydney Commission. In May 2015, at a public meeting about the proposed amalgamation of Pittwater and Warringah at the Mona Vale RSL, Planning Minister Stokes assures his Pittwater constituents that
I didn't become member for Pittwater in order to preside over the dismemberment of Pittwater Council.
But disturbingly, he now alludes to changes.
Surely that's a good thing.
Former Pittwater Mayor Robert Dunn castigates his former pupil, who's already left this vital meeting.
Sorry he's not here for some of these comments, but I hope they're passed on. It was a privilege to have him to mentor him a little bit. He's gone his own way. I'd love to mentor him a bit more tonight.
Eventually, around 300 Pittwater residents voted an emphatic, unanimous no to amalgamation.
I put the motion to the meeting. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried unanimously. Be quiet.
In August 2015, at a Future Cities collaborative welcome home dinner, Mr Ed Blakely confides to his audience of a long association with Stokes.
And I can remember those days, Rob, we were in the back of the room, back in the property council, talking about what we'd do if we had the opportunity. Well, we got the opportunity now, Rob.
Stokes responds with his concept of planning, where change is tightly controlled and older people are viewed as a problem.
As I often do when Ed talks, I had an epiphany. But the epiphany I had is that planning's as much an art. It's as much about art as it is about science. It's truly multidisciplinary, and that's because it's about people and delivering for people.
John Cotter's 8-step change model is a useful approach to follow, and this video shows you how. Cotter's first step is to create a sense of urgency around the need for change. This helps spark the motivation in your team to get things moving. Discuss the threats of not changing and the opportunities that successful change will offer.
The absence of growth creates far more difficult problems to deal with than the presence of growth. And you only need to see cities, the most arc examples are places like Detroit in the northeast of the United States, or even the northeast of England, the old industrial core of England, or cities in parts of Eastern Europe, to see the grinding civic poverty that can come from a lack of growth.
Next, get together a powerful coalition of people who are willing to show their support for your idea.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, ladies and gentlemen, your worships all. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I want to thank you for your work in leading the growth and change in this city. I want to thank the Future Cities Collaborative for leading that discussion about how we might best lead to create places that serve the people that we all represent and to create better communities.
Then, create a vision for change. Explain the values that are central to the process and share an inspiring picture of the future that people will want to be a part of.
What we need to do with our cities is restore them, is to make them better places to live and to sell the benefits of growth.
The fourth step is to keep communicating your vision frequently and powerfully, and to embed it in everything you do. Talk about it at every chance you get, and walk the talk to demonstrate the kind of behaviour you're looking for from others.
We don't want to be a place that's indistinguishable from other cities, but we want to be distinguishably Sydney or distinguishably Newcastle. We want to have our local identities and reinforce them as we develop, particularly Sydney as a great global city.
One of the most helpful things you can do for your team members is to remove any obstacles in their path.
Change is something that can be scary for people. And the reason in our, and we shouldn't just be dismissive of that, of course, and also as people get older, change becomes a more difficult thing to do. And that's going to be a situation facing us as our community overall is inexorably ageing.
Stokes and Blakely continually refer to the decaying inner cities of America as prime examples of the need for change. But inner city decay doesn't apply to Australian cities, especially in Stokes' electorate of Pittwater. There is no urban decay in Mona Vale, yet this is more or less what's now being pushed at all levels of government. Change is in the air, and it has been determined that we in Mona Vale shall have it. Distinctive, cohesive communities like Pittwater are now to be frog-marched into larger councils where the clearly expressed community desire to remain independent is, in effect, submitted to the self-interested demands of the property lobby.
There are 3 more steps to follow in Cotter's change model: creating short-term wins, building on the change, and anchoring the change.
In September 2015, Scott Morrison becomes Treasurer of the Turnbull Government. Lucy Turnbull resigns from the Board of Directors of the Property Council of Australia in 2015 to instead become its patron. Similarly, she also resigns from the board of the United States Study Centre and becomes its patron. In January 2016, Planning Minister Stokes establishes the Greater Sydney Commission, appointing Lucy Turnbull its head. Now in control of the Greater Sydney Commission juggernaut, Turnbull is worryingly ignorant of what's now being done in her name.
Are you disturbed at the loss of heritage there in Haberfield?
Around Haberfield. I'm not aware that there are houses going to be demolished at Haberfield. I'm not aware of the loss of heritage at Haberfield, I have to tell you.
Yes.
Lucy Turnbull also sits on the advisory board of directors of the Future Cities Collaborative at the US Study Centre. Mr Ed Blakely, Director of the Future Cities Collaborative, is appointed a District Commissioner of the Greater Sydney Commission, and Professor Rod Simpson, Blakely's Associate at the Future Cities Collaborative, becomes the Greater Sydney Commissioner's Environment Commissioner. The Greater Sydney Commission is now ultimate planning authority. In May 2016, while it is still establishing, councils deemed to be a problem are simultaneously dismissed, amalgamated and have administrators appointed to them by the Baird-Stokes government. This causes uproar across the state. Pittwater, exemplar of the Save Our Councils movement, has ceased to exist. The Greater Sydney Commission, in preparing new district plans, will now deal directly with the administrators of the amalgamated councils because the elected councillors have been dismissed. This undemocratic and autocratic situation will pertain until new council elections are held in September 2017, by which time the Baird-Stokes government will have rammed home the final elements of their program of forced change. In the meantime, Stokes, as Planning Minister, requires the Greater Sydney Commission to present its draft district plan in November 2016, and its final plan is to be presented in January 2017. 8 full months before new councillors are to be elected to the enlarged regional councils. The Mona Vale Place Plan is a document of deception. It uses controlled and limited public involvement as justification for imposing a predetermined densification template. Mona Vale already has major unit development, yet the enlivened Mona Vale Place Plan of 2016 misleadingly omits these extensive existing, recently completed, densified areas on the beachside at Gulf Avenue, at Darley Street East, Sea Beach Avenue, Heath Street, Bassett Street, and to the west at Darley Street West and at Park Street. The intention to deceive is underscored by the document's use of top-end oceanfront properties as supposed proof of Mona Vale's high-cost housing. Reference to an underutilised village park is similarly deceptive. Village Park can equally be described as thriving or packed, for it is the nature of a park to be a quiet public garden on the one hand and a busy recreational space on the other. Pittwater is meeting its 2007 state government housing targets. There's already been significant infill development, shop-top housing, seniors living, dual occupancy, granny flats, some affordable housing and retirement villages for an estimated 7,000 extra people to date. The Warriewood development has so far added another 7,000 for a total of 14,000, an increase in Pittwater's population of more than 25%. That's just until now. But Warriewood will soon complete for another 3,000 people, while at Ingleside, a second major land release is imminent for up to another 10,000. That's 13,000 more people coming down the line, as many again as we've already absorbed in recent years, and yet they want more, much more. This is not genuine urban planning. Rather, it's manipulation of the population by highly questionable American-inspired place planning dogma and change management theory. Pittwater Council's 1994 draft strategy for Ingleside and Warriewood was based on a series of checkable overlaying planning studies that took into account physical, environmental and social constraints. The point of this type of traditional planning is that the logic can be tested. But application of the new place planning methodology for Ingleside saw residents involved with large sheets of butcher's paper and crayons. This paid lip service to resident involvement, but the results cannot be checked and do not, in any event, reflect community views or aspirations. At Mona Vale, the place planning process involved residents in workshops using Lego and cardboard and pipe cleaners and cotton wool, with an understanding that they were developing the existing landscape master plan of 2003, which had long been the blueprint for Mona Vale. Such was not the case. Prior to secession, Mona Vale was neglected and run down, but thanks to Pittwater Council and its landscape architect Mark Erickson, Mona Vale is now an up-to-date, vibrant and pleasant place to live. It's not Jersey City in the USA, or the Meatpackers District in New York, or Dee Why, or Manly. Rather, it matches the aspirations of Peninsula residents and the lifestyle they cherish. Pittwater has had tremendous growth in recent years. More is imminent at Ingleside, and this will take decades to digest. But already our schools are overflowing, there's a shortage of sporting fields, and the traffic is often gridlocked. All we have to compensate for future loss of amenity is a promised Beeline bus service, and that to the city only. Moreover, the Beeline costings have blown out from $200 to $513 million. Nor has the modelling been provided to show how the Beeline would integrate with the existing Sydney bus service. Pittwater General Manager Mark Ferguson, Mayor Jacqueline Townsend and Planning Minister Dr Robert Gordon-Stokes met regularly in the months leading up to Pittwater's dismissal. But unlike previous historical dismissals of Warringah Council, no crime had been committed nor law broken. In fact, Pittwater was, by all accounts, save that of IPART, a successful, progressive and financially viable council that enjoyed an unusually high level of support from its constituents. Mayor Townsend appears to have deliberately acted for the demise of Pittwater in the way she voted in council on matters regarding Pittwater's independence. Mark Ferguson, appointed Pittwater's General Manager by the elected councillors of Pittwater, was extremely well paid, and as such it would be reasonable to expect his loyalty to Pittwater. Yet at 4 p.m. on the day Pittwater was killed off and subsumed by its old Warringah parent, Ferguson slid smoothly into the position of Northern Beaches Council Interim General Manager. Simultaneously, Pittwater's elected councillors were locked out of both council buildings and their email accounts. This complex event was carefully planned and meticulously executed. Robert Gordon-Stokes was raised in Pittwater, is a patrol captain in the local surf club and was mentored in his law studies for a time by Pittwater's first elected mayor. If any politician understood Pittwater, it should have been Robert Stokes. As Pittwater's member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, Stokes has a defined responsibility to represent the people. He has not done this. Rather, he has quite deliberately failed to do so, for 89% of them by council survey. Because of his dereliction, Pittwater has been hit by a perfect storm. From early December 2014 at the latest, Stokes set out to mislead his constituents with assurances there would be no forced amalgamation. Then he coaxed resident groups towards his faux vision of a greater Pittwater. Finally, flanked by the Mayor and General Manager, he worked for Pittwater's ultimate demise via forced amalgamation, dismissal of elected councillors, loss of planning control to the Greater Sydney Commission, and the imposition on Pittwater society of dubious place planning and change management methodologies that are inappropriate at anything other than corporate level. Along the way, he promised his resignation should a Northern Beaches Council get up, then lied in saying that he never said such a thing at all. This has led to the loss of Pittwater's unique identity and a Mona Vale Place Plan that forces massive densification where it is wanted by no one other than developers and the state government. The reality is that the public is being railroaded, shunted up a siding where there's no choice other than the one they're trying to foist on us. It's economic rationalism run wild, with an evangelistic overtone. Stokes, having practically tested his battle of the big backyard theories on Pittwater, will move on, and we, the people of Pittwater, will be left with a mess.
Sir Humphrey and Sir Ian will be laying down some informal guidelines for him.
How do you mean, informal guidelines?
Well, guidelines are perfectly proper, Minister. Everyone has guidelines for their work.
I thought these planning inspectors were supposed to be impartial.
Oh, really, Minister? So they are. Railway trains are impartial too. But if you lay down the lines for them, that's the way they go.
Into my heart an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires, what farms are those? That is the land of lost content. I see its shining plain, the happy highways where I went and cannot come again.